And I'm joined now by the Defence Minister, Stephen Smith. Welcome.
Pleasure, Chris.
Isn't it reasonable now for Commodore Kafer to expect an apology from you?
Well, I fully respect the decision by the Chief of the Defence Force and the Vice Chief of the Defence Force to return him to his job following the findings of the Kirkham inquiry. The Kirkham inquiry found that Commodore Kafer had dealt with the matter appropriately, but it also made the point that a different decision maker could make a different decision, and it was also unfortunate that the matter hadn't been discussed with the officer cadet, Kate, and her officer representing her interests. I made a very strong point at the time that I thought it was wrong. I thought it was an error of judgment to bring the character of a potential innocent victim of a sexual abuse and alleged sexual abuse into play, and I stand by that. I don't resile from that, but the decision's been made by the Chief of the Defence Force after long consultation with me and with the Secretary of the Department, and I fully respect that, and Commodore Kafer will return to work in the course of this week.
You said his actions were inappropriate, insensitive, wrong, completely stupid and almost certainly faulty at law, and most of the things that you said were wrong. So why don't you apologise?
Well, two of the matters that were dealt with at the same time, two unrelated disciplinary matters that were dealt with, one was quashed and one was upheld. I am not going to resile from what I did and said. I might be old-fashioned, but I simply don't believe it's appropriate to bring the character of an innocent victim of an alleged sexual abuse into play. Now, I draw no reference or inference to ADFA or Commodore Kafer ADFA staff, but when I grew up and trained as a lawyer, it was still some common practice in Australia when we found the victim of a alleged sexual abuse to somehow try and blame the victim. I have a very strong view on that, and I won't resile from it.
You certainly did. You trained as a lawyer and you tried Commodore Kafer in public. In fact, you put this into the public domain. It was you that said in an interview that there's one very concerning new aspect which I need to bring to public attention immediately. Before you talked about the disciplinary hearings and then condemned him, it appears without evidence. So surely you owe him an apology.
Well, that's not right. It's clear factual circumstances that at 1 o'clock on the relevant afternoon, Channel 10 contacted ADFA and asked about the disciplinary matters.
Behind the scenes.
And the journalist, I think they were always intending to go to air, Chris. They didn't win a Walkley Award because I did a doorstop.
And when they went to air, they went with your comments, which were confirming them and going beyond that, condemning the man and putting the Vice Chief of the Defence Force in no other position that he'd have to stand him down.
Well, Channel 10 had a story which was at the peak of the ADFA Skype incident. Unrelated disciplinary matters were dealt with on that day. I was told about it after the event. I was told about it after Channel 10 got the story, and my reaction was to make my view known publicly. I don't resile from that view. What we've seen arise from those circumstances are the reviews that we've released today, including a seminal report about pathway to cultural change, which will now be the basis upon which the Defence Force has to conduct itself. It's not a document prepared by me, it's a document prepared by the Chief and the Secretary, and it makes the point that high standards in the past have not been met. There has been a culture of turning a blind eye to failing to meet those standards, and now, from today, there is zero tolerance in the pathway to change document set out by the Chief of the Defence Force and the Secretary.
It's a very important document, and one of the people who will be in the forefront of trying to implement it will be the Commandant of the Australian Defence Force Academy, and that's now going to be Bruce Kafer. Do you have confidence in him?
Well, I was asked that question today, and it's not a question of whether I have confidence in him, it's a question of whether the Chief of the Defence Force, his commanding officer, and the Vice Chief of the Defence Force, his line commanding officer, have confidence in him. And as a result of the Kafer inquiry and report, they have confidence to return him to his work because there's no legal basis to stopping that or no legal basis to not doing that. And I have absolute confidence in the Chief of the Defence Force, the Vice Chief of the Defence Force and the service chiefs, all of whom I recommended for appointment, to deal with their responsibilities in terms of appointments, under the Defence Act. I have absolute confidence in them to make the correct judgments.
But Minister, you had no hesitation in declaring no confidence in this man personally, and now you won't declare confidence in him personally as he takes up this very important post.
No, what I said was that I believed he had made a serious error of judgment by dealing with unrelated disciplinary matters, dealing with absence from leave and use of alcohol at the same time as there was in the public arena allegations of serious sexual abuse against the woman concerned.
Well, one last point on this. Do you think that as a result of the ADF affair that the leaders of the Australian Defence Force have lost confidence in you?
Absolutely not. I mean, people are entitled to their views, but the Chief of the Defence Force, the Secretary and I work through these issues very carefully, work through not just the Kirkham issues and agreed the findings that we released today, work through very carefully the pathway to cultural change and all agreed that, and work through very carefully the proposed response to the DLA Piper review, which potentially sees us being in receipt of some 770 plausible allegations of sexual abuse over a long period of time. So, contrary to the assertions of others, we've been dealing with these matters carefully, methodically and together.
On those 775 allegations, would you consider, it is floated at least in the report, a Royal Commission to try and sort the way through them?
Well, we have to take it step by step. In the aftermath of the publicity and the controversy surrounding the so-called ADF Skype issue, Defence, the media were inundated with allegations of prior sexual abuse. The advice I've got from DLA Piper, who we asked to assess these matters at arm's length from Defence, is that of the original 1,000 allegations made, their current advice is that we've got some 775 allegations, the vast majority of which they regard as plausible allegations of sexual abuse or other abuse. Now,
and some of them criminal.
I'm expecting to...
Some of them criminal allegations.
Absolutely. Potentially serious criminal allegations. But we've got to take it step by step. I'm expecting to receive their final report by the end of this month. What I released today were none of the individual examples, but the suggestions as to how the government and Defence might respond, including relying upon current procedures to a Royal Commission, but also notions of apology, compensation and reconciliation.
Sure. Given the length of time and the number of cases which are plausible, and some of them, as you say, are potentially criminal, how can you say that there's not a systemic problem in Defence?
Well, I don't say that, and nor does the cultural pathway published today, effectively written by the Chief and the Secretary. That document says that Defence and its personnel are required to keep very high standards, and in the past those standards haven't been met. In the past there's also been a culture of effectively turning a blind eye to not meeting those standards. From today there is a zero tolerance, and that's good for Defence and good for Defence's reputation. It also very clearly makes the point that modern day community standards and attitudes to diversity and equity have changed dramatically, and Defence needs to respond to that.
Minister, briefly, are you confident that things are improving under your watch?
Absolutely. I think that we have made progress. I think the document that the Chief of the Defence Force and the Secretary have produced will in time be regarded as a seminal document. That document and all the other cultural reviews say we've made progress, but we need to do much more. Whether it's use of alcohol, treatment of women, personal conduct and the like. But the two great challenges now are implementing the Pathway to Cultural Change document, which sets out the new standards, the new arrangements, but also how we deal with, both Defence and as a government, deal with now some 700 plausible allegations of abuse and misconduct in the past.
Stephen Smith, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much.